time has come for a new economic policy for the United States. Its targets are unemployment, inflation.
At one point, President Nixon spoke up and quoted Nikita Khrushchev. And he said, Khrushchev once told me that sometimes in order to be a statesman, you have to be a politician for a while.
The problem with him was that he was willing to sacrifice principle too easily for political advantage.
The voters liked the president's war on prices. Nixon was reelected in a landslide. The economy did less well.
Right away, the economy went out of whack. People couldn't cover their costs. Ranchers stopped sending cattle to market. Farmers started drowning their chickens. Instead of controlling inflation, they were creating shortages.
And prices just kept on rising.
The last time I saw Nixon in the Oval Office was George Shultz. President Nixon said to me, "Don't blame George for this silly business of wage and price control," meaning George Shultz. And I said to him, "Oh no, Mr. President, I don't blame George. I blame you."
Britain's mixed economy, so widely imitated, was in similar trouble. It too was facing the deadly combination of unemployment and inflation. In theory, the Conservative Prime Minister Ted Heath and his cabinet believed in markets. In practice, like Nixon, they made a sharp U-turn and used wage and price controls to combat stagflation.
I was a junior minister in Ted Heath's government, and I remember having to attend meetings of 3 or 4 other ministers where we would actually decide the level of charges plumbers could charge next week to repair taps, and how much taxi drivers could charge for fares, and how much hairdressers should get in wages. It was absolutely unbelievable. It all came to a very sticky end, a complete collapse.
A coal miners' strike and an oil crisis plunged the country into darkness. Voters blamed Ted Heath and voted the Conservatives out of office.
Well, we're virtually out of business while the power's off. We've got no sets that we can operate at all.
We were the sick man of Europe. The English disease was the disease of strikes, which we had all over the place. And you know, it was so bad that Herman Kahn of the Hudson Institute wrote a book called The Year 2000. And he saw many things, but the one thing he did see was that the lowest standard of living in Europe in the year 2000 would be shared between Albania and the United Kingdom. Albania?
Margaret Thatcher had a gut instinct for market economics. Her father had been a grocer, and when she was a girl, she had helped him in the shop. Hard-working and studious, she won a place at Oxford University, where she became interested in student politics. While she was at Oxford, she read Hayek's Road to Serfdom. It made a lasting impression on her. Years later, when she became the first woman to lead the Conservative Party, she once slammed Hayek's book down on a table and announced, "This is what we believe."
Thatcher's office came on and said, could she come and drop in to see him? And so she called by, and there was a period of unaccustomed silence from Margaret Thatcher as she sat there, intense, attending to the master's words.
By 1974, Hayek sensed the world beginning to go his way.
And so far as the movement of intellectual opinion is concerned, it is now, for the first time in my life, moving in the right direction.
In the Battle of Ideas, 1974 was a turning point. Hayek's Nobel Prize came as a surprise, but the balance was now shifting away from Keynes and towards Hayek.
I'd like to say that when I was a young man, only the very old men still believed in a free market system. When I was in my middle ages, almost I myself and nobody else believed in it. And now I have the pleasure of having lived long enough to see that the young people believe again in it. Now that is a very important change.
The U.S. economy is going through the worst downturn since the Great Depression. Industry slowed. Unemployment rose. The Yom Kippur War was followed by an Arab oil embargo. Americans waited in gas lines, and the price of everything kept rising.
Well, 5% no good to nobody, is it?
Do you think you can win this strike?
Yes, I do.
They called it the winter of discontent. It seemed as if everyone was on strike.
I think it stinks like all the other damn strikes in this country run by the filthy socialist communist unions.
The garbage men were out. So were the ambulances. And if you died, the gravediggers were out too. With the economy in apparently terminal decline, the people voted for a new conservative government, headed by Margaret Thatcher.
And I'll strive unceasingly to try to fulfill the trust and confidence that the British people have placed in me and the things in which I believe.
Determined, and some said strident, she would revolutionize the economy.
The spirit of enterprise had been sat upon for years by socialism, by too high tax, by too high regulation, by too high public expenditure. The philosophy was nationalization, centralization, control, regulation. Now this had to end.
Thatcher squeezed government spending and cut subsidies to business. Thousands of bankruptcies and higher unemployment followed. Many saw her as uncaring. Britain had rarely been so divided.
Maggie! 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 Maggie Thatcher!
Thatcher had no time for conventional Keynesian economists who urged her to use government money to lessen the pain.
Although 364 economists wrote to the Times and said, this is outrageous, you'll put us into a deep depression from a recession, 364 were wrong, and the half dozen who supported us were right.
Those who urge us to relax the squeeze, to spend yet more money indiscriminately in the belief that will help the unemployed and the small businessman, are not being kind or compassionate or caring. I have only one thing to say. You turn if you want to.